Have you ever tried to explain something to someone, but they just refuse to hear you out? It's not just annoying, it's a science-backed communication disaster. Stick around as we deal with something that happens every day, sometimes many times per day, and even at night a couple times. And that's how not to be a pisser. Oh, that didn't come out right. It sounded better in my head. But in all seriousness, this is a real issue. If you don't know how to deal with bad listeners, it can wreck conversations, relationships, and even your confidence in speaking up. BAPISR, BAPISR, is actually an acronym I came up with to help people understand why some people never listen, and more importantly, how you can break through when it does happen. Because let's be real, nobody thinks they're a bad listener, but we've all been on the receiving end of someone who just refuses to hear what's being said. Maybe they assume they already know what you're going to say. Maybe they ignore anything that challenges their belief. Or maybe, just maybe, they're just waiting for their turn to talk. So why do people do this? Why do some people refuse to listen? Like their brain is actively rejecting new information. And more importantly, how do you get through to them? Stick with me, because I'm about to show you exactly why some people never listen and how to break through. Ever notice how some people completely reject anything that challenges what they already believe? It's like their brain has an automatic spam filter. If it doesn't match their existing opinions, delete. That's bias in action, the B in BAPISR. Now, there's actually a technical term for this. It's called confirmation bias. But let's keep it simple. Confirmation bias just means your brain likes being right. Instead of looking for the truth, your brain is constantly searching for evidence that proves it was right all along and ignoring anything that might prove it wrong. Let's say you're trying to explain that multitasking actually hurts productivity. If someone already believes multitasking makes them more efficient, their brain ignores the research and clings to the one time they answered emails while eating lunch and felt productive. And if you try to push harder, they just dig in even more. Bias isn't just about filtering what we hear. It shapes how we react. When new information threatens our beliefs, the brain instinctively defends itself instead of listening. So how do you get past this mental firewall? Instead of saying, that's completely wrong, the data says otherwise, try, that's interesting. What makes you think that? It forces them to explain the reasoning, which might make them realize the gaps in their logic on their own. It lowers their defenses because instead of feeling attacked, they feel like they're being heard. People don't like being told they're wrong, but they do like feeling smart. And when you ask a question, you let them do the thinking instead of making them feel like they have to fight you. And that brings us to the next reason people don't listen. Attitude. Because sometimes it's not just about what they believe. It's about what they think of you. Sometimes the problem isn't what you're saying. It's who is saying it. That's attitude, the A in BAPISR. Ever had a conversation where you could feel the other person had already decided you were wrong before you even finished your first sentence? They weren't evaluating your words fairly. They had already dismissed you before you got to the point. This is what's called attitude bias in action. People don't just listen based on what's being said. They listen based on who's saying it. Think about it. Two people could say the exact same thing, but one gets ignored while the other gets praised. Why? Because we subconsciously assign value to certain people's opinions over others. If someone already sees you as uninformed, emotional, or not worth listening to, it doesn't matter how much logic, data, or experience you bring. They've already tuned out. And here's the worst part. The less someone respects you, the less effort they put into actually understanding you. This is why so many conversations feel one-sided. It's why some people interrupt you, cut you off, or dismiss your points outright. It's not that they don't hear you, it's that they don't care to. Let's be honest, we all do this. If we don't respect someone's knowledge, we tune them out before they even finish talking. But here's the catch. It's not just about how we judge others, it's also about how we present ourselves. People don't just judge your words, they judge your tone, confidence, and delivery. Have you ever been right about something, but no one took you seriously because of how you said it? Maybe you sounded unsure, frustrated, or overly aggressive. And instead of hearing your point, people reacted to your attitude. So how do you fix this? Instead of saying, you're completely wrong about that, Try, I see why you'd think that. A lot of people feel the same way. But have you ever considered, it lowers their resistance because you're not dismissing their opinion outright. It positions you as someone worth listening to because people listen more when they feel heard first. The goal isn't just to be right, it's to be heard. And the best way to do that? Control your own attitude while understanding how theirs is affecting the conversation. This leads us to the next reason people don't listen: perception. Because sometimes it's not about what's true, it's about what people expect to be true. What if I told you that some people don't actually hear what you're saying? They hear what they think you're saying. That's perception, the P in BAPISR. People don't listen to your words, they listen to the version of you they've created in their head. Ever had a conversation where you said something completely neutral and the other person twisted it into an attack? Or maybe you gave someone a genuine compliment and somehow they took it as sarcasm. That's because their brain filled in the blanks based on their past experiences, emotions, and assumptions. Here's the reality. People don't hear what's actually being said. They hear what they expect to hear. Let's say you tell someone, I like pugs, but their brain translates that to, wow, so you hate golden retrievers? Wait, what? This happens because our brains love shortcuts. Instead of carefully analyzing each word, we take mental shortcuts based on what we think someone really means. And this gets even worse when someone already has a preconceived idea of you. If they believe you're always negative, they'll hear negativity when it's not there. If they think you're trying to criticize them, they'll hear criticism, even if you're being neutral. This is why two people can hear the exact same statement and walk away with two completely different interpretations. So how do you fix this? Instead of saying, that's not what I meant, you're taking it the wrong way, try, I can see how that might come across that way. What I actually meant was, it acknowledges their perception instead of dismissing it outright. It gives you the opportunity to redirect the conversation without triggering defensiveness. Because once someone believes you meant something a certain way, arguing about it won't help. The key is to correct the perception, not fight it. And that brings us to the next major reason people don't listen: ignorance. Because sometimes it's not about what they expect to hear, it's about what they don't know at all. Sometimes people don't listen, not because they're stubborn, not because they're biased, and not because they're twisting your words, but because they genuinely don't know what you're talking about. That's ignorance, the I in BAPISR. But here's the frustrating part. The less some people know, the more confident they are. This is called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. When someone lacks knowledge, but still believes they're an expert because they don't even know what they don't know. Ever had someone confidently tell you exactly how to grow a YouTube channel, but they've never actually posted a video? Or maybe they gave you advice on how to go viral, despite having zero experience with content creation? Yeah, that's ignorance. And the worst part, the more you try to explain, the more they resist, because in their mind, they already know enough. So how do you handle this? Instead of saying, you're wrong, the facts are here, try, I used to think the same way until I learned about this. It frames your knowledge as a shared experience rather than a correction. It makes them curious instead of defensive, because you're showing that you were once in their shoes. People don't like being corrected, but they do like feeling like they're learning something new. The key is to introduce new information without making them feel stupid. Now, I know you've dealt with this before, so tell me in the comments, what's the most confidently wrong piece of advice you've ever heard? Let's hear some stories. But what happens when someone does realize they're wrong and still won't budge? That's where things get frustrating, and that's where stubbornness comes in. Sometimes people don't listen, not because they don't know the truth, but because they can't admit they were wrong. That's stubbornness, the S in BAPISR. Even when people realize they're wrong, admitting it can feel like losing. And for some, losing isn't an option. This is called motivated reasoning, where someone doubles down on their argument, not because they believe it anymore, but because their ego is now at stake. Ever had an argument where the more facts you presented, the more ridiculous the other person's defenses became? That's because at this point, they're not just defending a belief, they're defending themselves. This is why you'll see someone shift the conversation, bring up unrelated points, or even attack you personally. Anything to avoid saying, yeah, maybe I was wrong. And let's be honest, we've all been guilty of this at some point. No one likes being wrong, but some people treat it like a personal attack on their intelligence or identity. So how do you deal with stubbornness? Instead of saying, why can't you just admit you're wrong? Try, I get why this is frustrating. A lot of people struggle with that same idea at first. It removes the pressure to lose. You're not forcing them to admit they were wrong. You're making it feel like a natural part of learning. It makes them feel like they're part of a bigger group. If a lot of people struggle with the same idea, it's not just them, which makes it easier to back down. Because here's the reality. The harder you push someone to admit they're wrong, the less likely they are to do it. And that brings us to the final reason people don't listen. Rightness. Some people don't just refuse to admit they were wrong. They think they were never wrong to begin with. That's rightness. They are in BAPISR. For these people, conversations aren't about exchanging ideas. They're about winning. Ever been in a debate where no matter what you said, the other person just kept moving the goalposts? You prove one of their points wrong, and suddenly that wasn't the real argument anyway. You provide evidence, and suddenly the evidence is fake. At this point, they're not listening to learn. They're listening to defend their pride. Some people struggle to admit when they're wrong, but others, they take it even further. For them, it's not just about refusing to back down. It's about rewriting reality so they were never wrong in the first place. Here's how you know you're dealing with someone who values being right more than being accurate. They never admit they made a mistake. They deflect criticism by changing the subject or attacking you. They turn debates into competitions where the goal isn't understanding, it's winning at all costs. And let's be honest, this is the most exhausting type of person to talk to because you could literally hand them undeniable proof and they'd still find a way to twist it. They'd rather bend reality than admit they might not have all the answers. So how do you handle this? Instead of saying, you never listen, you just want to be right, try, it's okay if we see this differently. I respect your perspectives either way, as it takes away their power to argue. When you refuse to play the who's right game, they can't win. It lets you walk away without wasting your energy. Some battles aren't meant to be won. They're meant to be avoided. Because here's the reality of this one. When someone cares more about being right than actually getting it right, you're never going to change their mind. And sometimes the smartest move isn't to keep arguing. It's to stop engaging. Now, speaking of people who always think they're right, let's talk about the worst case scenario. The people who don't just refuse to listen, but manipulate, deflect, and twist every conversation to serve themselves. Narcissists don't just struggle with listening. They redefine reality to make themselves the hero and avoid criticism at all costs. Some narcissists take over conversations loudly, making everything about them, while others manipulate more subtly, using passive aggression to maintain control. That's why the 10 coping strategies in this next video might just deflate their ego and help you survive when you have to deal with them. So if you've ever been trapped in a conversation where everything somehow circles back to them, click the video on your screen now, because this is the one that's going to change the way you handle them forever. Thanks for watching. I'll see you online soon.